10 The Scariest Fairy Tales from the Brothers Grimm. When I look for creepy October reading, I turn to the OGs of Twisted Terror, the Grimm brothers. It's true that picking messed up moments from among the Grimm's fairy tales is like shooting golden geese in a barrel, but some stand out among their routinely bloody brethren, adding cannibalism, filicide, and dismemberment to the usual stew of lies, misanthropy, and murder. Here are 10 dark fairy tales with more gore than a Coen Brothers movie marathon. The Little Cinder Girl. As one of the bloodiest stories in the Grimm collection, this scary fairy tale teaches the value of tending graves and letting the universe take revenge on your enemies. In the original version of this scary fairy tale, the two stepsisters were beautiful, Cinderella was abused, and the stepmother was a knife-wielding opportunist that wouldn't take no for an answer. After the ball, which lasted 3 days, the prince came looking for the girl he danced with. When the stepmother sees that he will be trying the shoe on all of the girls, she convinces her 2 daughters to let her cut pieces of their feet off in order to fit. They acquiesce, believing their mother, who says, "When you're a princess, you'll never have to walk again." The only reason the prince doesn't marry either of them is because the birds in the tree that grows over Cinderella's mother's grave tell the prince that the shoe is bloody when the carriage passes beneath it. After returning the damaged goods twice, he finally tries it on Cinderella, and the shoe fits. At the wedding, the flock of birds that haunt Cinderella's grave dives down and eats the eyes out of the stepmother and stepsisters, leaving them blind. The End Bluebeard. The go-to example when you want to prove that Disney is only ever telling half the story. The rich nobleman of the title has got girl problems, namely, his pretty young wives keep dying on him. But as long as there are rich lords, there'll be dads looking to give them their daughters, and in this tale, Bluebeard has taken yet another wife. Soon after their wedding, he goes away, leaving her with a ring of keys and instructions to use all but the littlest of them, which locks the door to a room she must not enter. Freud's spectacles just fell into his soup. Of course she enters the room, of course it's filled with the remains of all his murdered wives. The little key becomes covered in unremovable blood, tipping Bluebeard off to her transgression. She is saved from joining his wives at the last minute by leaping lizards. A room full of murdered women. Even a wisecracking animal sidekick couldn't lighten the mood in this one. The Girl Without Hands. Never make a bargain with a mysterious old man you meet on the road. Either you end up embroiled in a pyramid scheme or you find you've sold your daughter to the devil. The latter is the fate of an impoverished miller, who promises the devil in disguise whatever's standing behind his mill in exchange for untold riches. Of course, it's not the apple tree the devil's after, but the miller's daughter. When he comes to fetch her, she's too clean for him to touch. He returns the next day, when she'll be good and dirty again, but he can't grab her. She's cried so hard that her hands have been washed clean. Her feckless dad is forced to chop off her hands, but even the stumps are too pure. The devil disappears, and the handless girl hits the road. Soon she snags a king for a husband, as fairy tale women tend to do, but her journey's not over. Working, as he so often does, through a series of forged letters, the devil manages to trick the traveling king into believing his wife's given birth to a monster, and to trick the king's mother into thinking he wants her to murder his wife. Instead, she sends the homeless girl back into the wilderness. Things come out all right 7 years later, and in the meantime her hands grow back, but damn. See line 1. Don't even look at that rumpled old dude with the glint in his eye, the robber bridegroom. Yet another man looking to offload his daughter figures he can't do better than the first man that comes along, a gentleman who apparently interviews well. This gentleman invites his bride-to-be for a visit. A dutiful girl, she sets off despite her horrible sense of foreboding. Sure enough, his house turns out to be a den of cannibals, where his kindly, but, you know, cannibalism-enabling, housekeeper conceals the bride behind a barrel. As she watches, her betrothed and his friends return with a kidnapped girl, chop her up, cook her, and devour her. Nothing escapes them but a single finger, which the bride uses to make a case against him later. Saved by a telltale digit, the Juniper Tree. You two aren't having any. I've got a feeling that this is all for me. Thus spoke a father in the process of eating his son. But let's back up. This gorgeous, fairytale grand guignol opens on a rich man's wife and her longing for a child. When she finally gives birth to a son, she dies of joy. And soon after, her husband takes a second wife. In classic stepmother tradition, she's violently jealous of the boy, finally chopping his head off in a moment of madness. Her crime is covered up by serving him in a stew, and his half-sister buries his bones under the same juniper tree that holds his birth mother's remains. He's transformed into a vengeful little bird, whose song drives his stepmother to the brink of insanity, right before he drops a millstone on her head. By fairy tale logic, her death leads to his resurrection. No hard feelings, Pop, Mother Hola. This is a pretty typical Grimm fairy tale, except for the horrible face-eating end. There is a girl who has a horrible stepmother and stepsister. The stepmother hates her, and the stepsister is lazy. To get rid of the girl, the stepmother throws her down the well so that she'll drown. When the girl wakes up, she is in a beautiful land. As she walks, she sees things that need to be done, an apple tree that needs to be picked, bread that needs to be baked, and a house that needs to be cleaned. She does it all without even thinking about payment. When she finishes cleaning the house, a creepy old woman, Mother Hola, shows up and asks her to be a servant in the land. The girl accepts and works diligently for an entire year. When her service is up, Mother Hola loads her up with gold and jewels and sends her back. Upon her arrival, the stepmother and stepsister were envious of her good fortune. In fact, when the girl begins to tell her story, diamonds and jewels spill from her lips. She doesn't even finish her story, and the stepmother has pushed her own daughter down the hole. Unfortunately, because the girl is so lazy, she doesn't do anything. She doesn't pick the apples, she allows the bread to burn, and she shows up at Mother Hola's, demanding to be made a servant. Mother Hola does, but lets her go after only a few days. When she requests a reward, Mother Hola covers her in pitch and sends her home. When she arrives and begins to tell her story, toads and snakes spew from her mouth. A giant toad lands on her mother's face and remains there forever, chewing on her nose. Some children's roll in slaughter. There were some children who decided to play butchers. One of them was the butcher, the other the pig. The little butcher took the pig by the neck and slit his throat, catching his blood in a little bowl. When the authorities saw him, they devised a way to know whether the boy was evil or just playing a game. When the boy was given a choice between a gold coin and a delicious apple, he chose the apple and so was set free. Two little boys saw their father butchering a pig and decided to reenact it. The older brother slit his younger brother's throat. The mother, who was upstairs bathing their littlest brother, ran downstairs to see what was happening. When she saw what had been done, she was so mad, she killed the oldest boy with the knife. She remembered her youngest baby in the bathtub, but it was too late, the baby had drowned. She was so distraught, she hung herself. When her husband came home, he was devastated. He died of a broken heart only days later. Fitcher's bird. Clearly the brothers Grimm had a thing for creepy marriage stories. A wizard disguised as a poor beggar would kidnap girls. Then he would leave the house and give them two tasks, to look after an egg, and to not enter the forbidden room at any cost. The girl, passing by the room, lets curiosity get the best of her and enters to find a basin filled with blood and body parts. Scared, she drops the egg into the basin, resulting in a stain on the egg that she can't wash off. The wizard comes home and, once he sees the stain, he knows that she's been in the forbidden room. For disobeying him, the wizard kills the girl by cutting her head off and throwing her in the basin. He then goes off to kidnap other girls, the poor boy in the grave. This tale is not grotesque, but it is definitely a dark story about a boy and his misfortune. An orphaned boy is given to the care of a greedy rich husband and wife. The husband quickly discovers that the boy is not particularly gifted in any area. Whatever task is given to the boy, he manages to mess it up. Each time the boy messes up, he is abused. One day, tired of his lack of abilities, the husband tells the boy that if he messes up again he is going to be beaten once more. Alas, the boy did his deed wrong. Terrified, he decides to take his own life before giving his caretaker the opportunity to do so. He recalls the wife hiding a poison under the bed, which was actually honey. She told everyone it was poison, so people would stay away from it. Realizing he is not dying, the boy recalls the husband having poison for flies, which turns out to be wine. Drunk out of his mind, the innocent boy thinks his death is approaching. He begins to dig a grave for himself before falling into the grave and dying there. The Goose Girl. The Goose Girl follows a princess betrothed to a prince. When the time comes to marry him, the girl's mother sends her to the prince's castle with a handmaiden and all the riches. The handmaiden, being wicked, bullies the princess, exchanges clothes with her, and switches horses. Upon arrival, the handmaiden fools the kingdom into thinking she is the princess due to marry the prince. The real princess is kept at the castle and is asked to help tend to the geese. Eventually, the truth comes out, and the handmaiden is placed in a barrel studded with pointy nails, tied to 2 horses, and dragged. Ouch.